Welcome to The Walls Are Closing In, a presentation on the future of work, automation, and its influence on emergency management. Since being formally established in the late 1970s, the field of emergency management has encountered various external pressures. More recently, three specific pressures have grown in intensity, increasingly impacting one another and the field as a whole. First, the field of emergency management has faced ongoing challenges in establishing professional legitimacy, relevance, and influence, despite decades of professionalization efforts by academics and practitioners alike. The symptoms are widespread and evidenced by examples ranging from the frequent subordinate positioning of emergency management within jurisdictional hierarchies to the divestment of core emergency management functions to Homeland Security agencies and resilience offices. These examples represent only a small portion of numerous, well-documented systemic challenges encountered by emergency management agencies. For a comprehensive analysis of these issues and more, the Argonne National Lab's Emergency Management Organizational Structures, Staffing, and Capacity Study serves as a significant recent resource. Despite its inherent limitations and flaws, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has traditionally functioned as the cornerstone of professional credibility within the field. Yet, over the last year and a half, deliberate attempts to abolish the agency have compromised its standing as an institutional exemplar. Because FEMA serves as a benchmark for institutional isomorphism throughout the emergency management field, its degradation is set to trigger significant cascading impacts across state, tribal, territorial, and local emergency management agencies. Shifting our focus to Wall 2, historically, emergency management has been tasked with addressing an extensive array of threats and hazards. Wall 2 represents the growing demand for risk reduction and consequence management functions. This mounting pressure is fueled by multiple interconnected factors. Natural hazards are becoming more erratic, frequent, and severe due to a changing climate. Critical infrastructure and societal systems are experiencing failure as they age without maintenance and investment. And finally, dependency on complex, interdependent technological systems is growing. Recently, Wall 2 has gained momentum through a notable scope creep, as emergency managers are increasingly called upon to manage chronic societal stressors like the opioid epidemic and housing instability. Financial pressures have become a relentless reality across all levels of government, defining the challenges of Wall 3. A common mandate of doing more with less is now issued by constituents and senior leadership to every department, from the library to the fire service. Emergency management has not been immune to these pressures, leading to staff reductions and hiring freezes. The field's financial stability is increasingly precarious due to a heavy dependence on federal grants. Over the last 2 decades, these grant programs have undergone significant funding cuts, and most recently, the implementation of extensive restrictions on eligibility and how funding can be utilized. While the initial 3 walls have gained momentum lately, this presentation centers on a 4th wall that has surged even more rapidly over the past 3 years: artificial intelligence. My focus is not on the weaponization of AI models or AI-enhanced disinformation campaigns, which already preoccupy many in our field. Rather, I am addressing a direct threat automation poses to the professional livelihoods of emergency managers. During my 2023 presidential address to the International Association of Emergency Managers, I highlighted my escalating concerns regarding AI's influence on the emergency management workforce. When we look at Wall 4, I see 2 main risks that are being driven by automation. The first is task encroachment. We're seeing specialized duties that used to be the exclusive domain of emergency managers, things like risk analysis, managing grants, and developing plans and exercises, now increasingly within the capabilities of the latest AI tools. The second risk is deskilling. As these AI tools become more intuitive and as ubiquitous as Microsoft Office, other officials, like fire chiefs or city managers with collateral emergency management responsibilities, might start using them to bypass the need for professional emergency management expertise altogether. Generative AI has challenged the long-held belief that knowledge work was immune to automation. Although all knowledge sectors are feeling the impact, I believe emergency management is uniquely vulnerable due to the pressures exerted by the other three walls. This not yet profession has failed to effectively advocate for the critical role they play in their organizations, precisely as senior leadership face the allure of automation as a budget-friendly alternative to expensive personnel for managing the mounting list of threats and hazards facing their jurisdictions. The outlook I have described presents a significant challenge. When we consider the existential threats of task encroachment and deskilling alongside the pressures from the first three walls, we are forced to confront a fundamental question. What precisely will remain for emergency managers to do in the age of artificial intelligence? Current AI research offers valuable insights, particularly studies examining how automation impacts the workforce. To predict these shifts, many economists utilize methodologies that break down various jobs into specific tasks, then map those tasks against the evolving capabilities and weaknesses of AI systems. Rather than delving into that level of granular detail, I would like to present a straightforward framework proposed by Dr. Daniel Susskind in his 2025 article, What Will Remain for People to Do? Susskind posits that human labor will persist despite widespread AI adoption due to three specific constraints: general equilibrium limits, preference limits, and moral limits. Let's look at each category and their application to the field of emergency management. The concept of general equilibrium limits is rooted in economic theory. Economic efficiency suggests that human labor should concentrate on areas of comparative advantage, even in scenarios where machines possess an absolute advantage in overall productivity. This limit suggests that even if AI achieves absolute advantage, performing all tasks better than humans, it will not perform all of them. In a fully efficient system, AI will specialize in tasks where its superiority is greatest, its comparative advantage, such as complex data modeling and analysis. For example, imagine an AI that is 100 times better than a person at designing a power grid, but only 10 times better at managing stakeholder feedback. The AI will be deployed to focus entirely on designing the power grid, its area of immense superiority, maximizing overall economic output. This leaves managing feedback to the human, who, despite being absolutely slower, retains the comparative advantage in that residual task, as leaving them idle would be economically inefficient. Applying this to emergency management, practitioners may retain a comparative advantage in managing social nuances and political relationships. However, a significant concern exists when applying this line of thinking to emergency managers within non-emergency management agencies. Planning and analysis tasks where AI may hold the absolute advantage are often handled by professional civilian planners, whereas political and public affairs work is frequently performed by sworn or elected leadership. Furthermore, this principle only supports the idea that some tasks will remain for labor. It does not guarantee that there will be sufficient demand or high enough wages for that work. Both preference and moral limits arise when human consumers place intrinsic value on the human-led process behind a task, rather than just focusing on the efficiency of the outcome. Preference limits specifically refer to situations where individuals have a distinct taste or desire for a task to be carried out by a person. This human preference is typically rooted in aesthetic, achievement, or empathetic factors. In these cases, value is derived from human creativity, human-to-human competition, or the emotional depth of empathy, which persists even if a machine is technically superior. In the context of emergency management, while aesthetic and achievement motivations may be less relevant, there is a significant role for human involvement driven by empathetic needs. This unique human capacity is vital for responsibilities that hinge on interpersonal connection, including establishing stakeholder trust, navigating social subtleties, and providing compassionate consequence management. Moral limits, much like preference limits, prioritize the nature of the process over the final result. These limits elevate the focus on process, as individuals maintain that certain responsibilities morally necessitate human involvement, rather than merely preferring it. Moral limits demand human accountability for tasks with normative significance, as machines currently lack the legal and ethical agency to be held responsible for outcomes, regardless of their superior efficiency. This principle mandates a human in the loop for critical emergency management decisions, such as resource triage or large-scale protective action recommendations, where the exercise of human moral judgment is paramount over mere algorithmic optimization. Adherence to process-based moral theories implies that the legitimacy of a decision hinges not on the beneficial outcome, but on the human exercise of rational, ethical deliberation in high-stakes scenarios. The application of this moral constraint poses significant concerns for emergency management practitioners who interact with the non-emergency management authorities tasked with high-stakes decision-making. In many instances, emergency management agencies lack the statutory or regulatory authority to execute the specific types of critical decisions that would necessitate the application of process-based moral theories. The primary function of these staff members is often to evaluate complex situations and offer expert guidance to senior military, public safety, or elected officials who hold ultimate decision-making accountability. Consequently, a fundamental uncertainty remains. Will the progression of deskilling diminish the necessity for professional emergency managers to participate in these critical advisory and decision support processes?
Applying the constraints identified in Susskind's framework, I argue that many emergency management offices are on a trajectory toward obsolescence instead of establishing themselves as essential. This downward trajectory is already visible across various jurisdictions, propelled by the combined force of the other three systemic pressures. Media coverage regularly features cases where local governments decide to integrate emergency management departments into different agencies, resulting in the mission becoming a collateral responsibility for staff in other positions. Regrettably, advocacy efforts within emergency management aimed at resisting these integrations often focus on the routine administrative tasks that are most susceptible to automation. Survival requires a fundamental reinvention of our field, centering our value on responsibilities that require a trusted human. We should look to other high-consequence industries that have successfully balanced advanced automation with the continued necessity of human leadership. A clear parallel is aviation. While autopilot manages many technical aspects, passengers still rely on the presence of a qualified captain for safety and trust. Unless we are seen as an irreplaceable and value-adding part of our organizations, we risk continuing to be relegated to tasks that ignore our strategic, risk-informed expertise if we aren't eliminated entirely. In conversations with colleagues in academia, I've asked how they have updated emergency management curricula to reflect the rapid evolution of AI over recent years. It is discouraging that for many, the most significant change has been developing deterrence to prevent students from using generative AI to write their papers. Higher education must lead this evolution, prioritizing a broad conceptual understanding over the tactical task execution typically emphasized in emergency management training programs. Curricula should pivot away from teaching routine skills that are increasingly susceptible to technological encroachment. Instead, educational efforts must highlight uniquely human competencies, such as navigating moral ambiguity, demonstrating value, and influencing stakeholders. Students need to understand how to leverage automation as a strategic advantage and practice managing the interface between human expertise and machine intelligence. Academic programs must also confront the difficult possibility that post-9/11 emergency management job forecasts may not be realized due to oversaturation and the four systemic pressures we described earlier. One approach could be to shift toward broadening minor programs to equip many disciplines with human-centric risk reduction and consequence management skills, essential for the current risk landscape. Opportunity exists even in the face of these four pressures. Instances already exist where emergency managers have effectively deployed automation to help minimize administrative toil and dedicate more time to human-centered initiatives. This shift may even enable emergency managers to establish themselves as the critical humans in the loop, specifically tasked with navigating the unique risks and vulnerabilities arising from our growing reliance on complex, interdependent AI tools and infrastructure. But to seize these opportunities, we must effectively communicate to our stakeholders that our value is found not in the tasks we do, but in the judgment and empathy we provide before, during, and after a crisis. If you are conducting research on AI's impact on the emergency management workforce, I'd love to chat and discuss opportunities to collaborate. Thank you, and please reach out using the contact information here if you have any questions.